April the 8th, 1943, 27,000 feet above Conches, France. The oxygen mask couldn't hide Oberleutnant Ralph Hermiken's smirk. Through the crystal-clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A5, he watched the ungainly shapes clawing their way skyward. "Die Army has sent us flying milk bottles," he radioed to his wingman, laughter echoing in his voice. Below, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the U.S. 4th Fighter Group strained upward, their 2,000 horsepower Pratt and Whitney double Wasps dragging 7 tons of machine through the thin air. To German eyes accustomed to sleek Bf-109s and nimble Spitfires, the Americans' barrel-shaped machines looked absurd: stubby wings, oversized propellers, and cockpits like glass houses. What Hermiken and his comrades did not realize was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon destined to shatter the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, those milk bottles would turn into predators. 850 caliber Browning machine guns, 3,400 rounds, 6,000 bullets a minute, enough firepower to saw a fighter in half in seconds. The transformation began that morning, when Major Don Blakesley of the 335th Squadron, and RAF Spitfire veteran, spotted the Germans preparing their attack. He knew survival in a P-47 meant unlearning every instinct of dogfighting. The Thunderbolt was no duelist. It was a juggernaut, a weapon that used weight, power, and altitude to bend the rules of aerial war. Yet in the spring of 1943, the odds seemed grim. The Luftwaffe was packed with hardened veterans of Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Americans, they had 0 days in combat. In their first month, they lost 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 kills. German aces mocked the aircraft as clumsy cows, easy prey for Focke-Wulfs. Even the RAF quietly doubted America's choice of fighter. But the Germans missed something. The P-47 could take punishment that should have been fatal. One limped home with over 120 holes. Another, engine smoking, still brought its pilot across the channel. Its massive radial engine, without fragile coolant lines, shrugged off hits that crippled German machines. And when its guns found their mark, the results were devastating. The turning point came June the 26th, 1943, over Lille. 48 Thunderbolts of the 61st Squadron were ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulfs led by Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, brother of Adolf Galland. 2nd Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson, flying rear guard, was caught in the opening barrage. His canopy shattered, his engine cowling ripped away, his cockpit filled with smoke and fire. Wounded and blinded by oil, Johnson tried to bail out, but the canopy track was jammed by cannon fire. He was trapped in a crippled machine at 27,000 feet. Then came the impossible. With controls barely responding, the P-47 kept flying. Johnson leveled off and limped toward England. A lone Focke-Wulf 190 spotted him and attacked again and again, emptying its guns into the staggering Thunderbolt. But the American fighter refused to die. Finally, out of ammunition, the German pilot saluted and broke away, leaving Johnson's shattered, flying milk bottle to drag itself home. That day, the Luftwaffe learned the truth. The P-47 Thunderbolt was no joke. It was a monster. And monsters, once awakened, are not easily stopped. One limped home with over 120 holes. Another, engine smoking, still brought its pilot across the channel. Its massive radial engine, without fragile coolant lines, shrugged off hits that crippled German machines. And when its guns found their mark, the results were devastating. The turning point came June the 26th, 1943, over Lille. 48 Thunderbolts of the 61st Squadron were ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulfs led by Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, brother of Adolf Galland. 2nd Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson, flying rear guard, was caught in the opening barrage. His canopy shattered, his engine cowling ripped away, his cockpit filled with smoke and fire. Wounded and blinded by oil, Johnson tried to bail out, but the canopy track was jammed by cannon fire. He was trapped in a crippled machine at 27,000 feet. Then came the impossible. With controls barely responding, the P-47 kept flying. Johnson leveled off and limped toward England. A lone Focke-Wulf 190 spotted him and attacked again and again, emptying its guns into the staggering Thunderbolt. But the American fighter refused to die. Finally, out of ammunition, the German pilot saluted and broke away, leaving Johnson's shattered, flying milk bottle to drag itself home. That day, the Luftwaffe learned the truth. The P-47 Thunderbolt was no joke. It was a monster. And monsters, once awakened, are not easily stopped. Colonel Hubert Zemke of the 56th Fighter Group drilled a new doctrine into his men. Don't turn. Don't climb at low altitude. Use speed, weight, and firepower. What had been mocked as bulk now became a weapon. In a dive, no aircraft in Europe could match it. From 30,000 feet, a Thunderbolt could hit 550 miles per hour, faster than any German machine could follow. And when it pulled up, it climbed like a rocket, leaving pursuers gasping in the thin air. Captain Walker, Bud Mahurin perfected the boom and zoom tactic, Thunderbolts massing high, then rolling inverted, diving like hammers, and tearing through German formations with blistering firepower. Survivors described it as flying into a wall of lead. The revelation came in August 1943, during the Great Regensburg-Schweinfurt raid. Major Dave Schilling's flight of P-47s pounced from 28,000 feet on a formation of Messerschmitt 110s, twin-engine bomber-destroyers bristling with heavy cannon. A surviving German gunner later recalled, "They came down like thunder from heaven. I fired first, saw hits, but the American didn't even shudder. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of me simply came apart, wings gone, tail gone, crew gone. It wasn't shot down, it was erased." 8 German aircraft were destroyed in under a minute. Each Thunderbolt carried nearly 900 pounds of 50 caliber ammunition. At convergence range, its 8 Brownings spewed 100 rounds per second into a 6-foot circle. German fighters struck by that fire didn't fall, they disintegrated. By autumn 1943, the Luftwaffe's confidence began to crack. At high altitude, the P-47 thrived while German engines starved. When Ace Hans Philipp, 206 victories to his name, was blown out of the sky by a Thunderbolt over Bremen, the message was clear. If Germany's best couldn't survive, what hope did anyone else have? The Thunderbolt had arrived. No longer a joke, no longer a target. It was now the monster of the skies. The sound came first. A deep, menacing rumble that rolled across the countryside like a storm. German troops swore they could identify a P-47 by ear alone. The thundering roar of paddle-blade propellers, whose tips sliced the air at near supersonic speed. They called it Donnerschlag, the thunderclap. And when that sound grew louder, it meant death was coming. By March 1944, Thunderbolts fitted with external fuel tanks could finally escort bombers deep into Germany. 2 108-gallon wing tanks, or a 75-gallon belly tank, pushed their range beyond 1,000 miles. Drop the tanks, and the heavy fighter instantly became an equal match for its opponents. The Luftwaffe tried to shift focus back to the bombers, but that meant flying through the P-47 screen, an increasingly suicidal gamble. Even the Luftwaffe's most seasoned aces learned respect for the Jug. On March 6, 1944, Major Gnthe Rahl, 275 victories to his name, survived an encounter with Thunderbolts that left him badly wounded. Years later, he remembered, "We laughed when we saw them, fat silhouettes in the sun." 30 seconds later, no one was laughing. They came down like an avalanche. Solid streams of fire, not bursts. To be caught in that was instant death. Escort duty revealed another hidden edge: endurance. German fighters guzzled fuel at combat power, forced to break off after minutes. But the Thunderbolt's big radio could lope along efficiently for hours, trading shifts as top cover while still retaining enough for combat and return. By spring 1944, the Mustang began taking over long-range escort. That freed the P-47 to embrace a new role: fighter-bomber. In April, the Jug became the Allies' hammer against German ground forces. Its 8 heavy Brownings shredded trucks and half-trucks, while armor-piercing incendiary rounds burned through tank decks. 2 seconds of fire put 160 half-inch projectiles into a space the size of a truck. Then came bombs and rockets, 1,000-pounders slung beneath the wings, and 10 5-inch high-velocity rockets that hit like artillery shells. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding Panzergrenadiers in Normandy, recalled the terror. They came so low you could see the pilots' faces. Then the roar, the rockets screaming, the hammer of machine guns. A column of trucks vanished in flames in one pass. We called them Jabos, but they were more than that. Flying artillery. On D-Day, more than 500 P-47s covered the invasion beaches. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer, one of the few Germans to reach the beaches, reported bitterly, "The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts from sea level to 30,000 feet. 12 of us went in. I was the only one to return." The numbers told the story. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts destroyed 651 locomotives, 3,800 trucks, over 500 armored vehicles, and thousands of horse-drawn wagons. German mobility in daylight ceased to exist. And the Jug's war did not end in Europe. In the Pacific, the P-47N, built for range, escorted B-29s to Japan. Japanese ace Saber Sakai admitted in awe, "We called them monsters. Our cannon fire did nothing. Their return fire tore us apart." From the thunderclap overhead to the smoking wrecks below, The message was clear. The P-47 Thunderbolt was no longer a fighter. It was a force of nature. Flown in from depots in England, the Luftwaffe's losses during Operation Bodenplatte were catastrophic. In a single day, 271 aircraft and 213 pilots were gone, many of them irreplaceable instructors and veteran leaders. Losses the Germans could never recover from. The Americans, by contrast, lost 134 aircraft across all targeted airfields. Within a week, every one of them had been replaced. The numbers alone told the truth. Germany was facing inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation built 15,683 Thunderbolts during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak output, the Farmingdale plant on Long Island rolled one fresh P-47 off the line every hour, round the clock. In Evansville, Indiana, a factory built from empty farmland in 1942, was producing 500 aircraft a month by 1944. Each machine was a marvel of mass production, 65,000 parts, 8 miles of wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The massive Pratt & Whitney engine contained 2,400 precisely machined components. Yet workers, many of them women new to industry, assembled them with flawless precision that often surpassed peacetime standards. The scale of ammunition production was just as staggering. A single Thunderbolt sortie burned through 3,400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. By mid-1944, U.S. consumption topped 10 million rounds per month. At the Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, workers turned out 30 million cartridges every month, each crafted to microscopic tolerances to feed flawlessly through synchronized gun systems. Fuel demands were equally immense. A Thunderbolt burned 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, up to 300 in combat. The 9th Air Force alone consumed 25 million gallons monthly, all shipped across the Atlantic in tankers, another miracle of American industry. But it wasn't just machines, it was men. By 1944, the U.S. was graduating 30,000 pilots annually, more than Germany trained during the entire war. Every P-47 pilot logged a minimum of 400 flight hours before combat, including 100 in advanced fighters. German replacements were arriving with barely a quarter of that experience. The difference showed in the skies. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts recalled arriving in England with 420 hours, 75 of them in the P-47. I knew exactly what to do on my first mission. The German across from me didn't have half my experience. It wasn't a fair fight. By spring 1945, the Luftwaffe was broken. Fuel shortages grounded most units. Experienced aces were gone. Even with planes and fuel, attacking meant facing Thunderbolt formations that ruled every altitude. New pilots spoke of jabo fever, physical symptoms of panic at the mere report of P-47s in the area. The statistics were devastating. In Europe alone, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in the air, 3,315 on the ground, over 80,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored vehicles, and tens of thousands of trucks. The 9th Air Force alone flew more than 213,000 sorties, dropping 120,000 tons of bombs, firing 135 million rounds, and launching 60,000 rockets. Even German commanders admitted defeat. Joseph Priller, once mocking the pregnant cow, called the P-47 the best fighter bomber ever built. And in 1985, Adolf Galland summarized it best: "We laughed at them in 1943, but the Americans didn't build a European fighter, they built an American one, a machine of power, survivability, and overwhelming firepower. In the end, they buried us under an avalanche of steel." What struck me most was realizing that America built over 15,000 of these complex machines, while fighting a two-ocean war. Each P-47 engine was more intricate than anything Germany produced, yet Americans turned them out faster than we could build simple fighters. That was the moment I knew we never had a chance. The guns alone, the 50 caliber Brownings we called Roosevelt's piano, made a sound no pilot ever forgot. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it destroyed it. The Thunderbolt embodied American industrial philosophy perfectly. Brute force engineering backed by limitless resources. Every component was overbuilt, overpowered, overengineered. Wing spars could carry 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. The engine mount tolerated 12 Gs. Control cables were doubled throughout, with automatic backups. The ammunition system was a marvel: 8 separate ammo boxes, 425 rounds each, fed through electric boosters to prevent jamming during violent maneuvers. Guns were electrically heated to prevent freezing at altitude. Each could be individually charged, and synchronized. Convergence was adjustable from 150 to 400 yards, letting pilots fine-tune for their preferred engagement range. Even after the war, some German veterans insisted the P-47 won by quantity, not quality. Yet combat records proved otherwise. In engagements where numbers were equal, Thunderbolts consistently prevailed. The heavy 50 caliber armament, once dismissed as inferior to cannon, proved more lethal in practice. Gun camera footage revealed why. Cannon shells were destructive but limited, typically 120 to 200 rounds per gun. The P-47's continuous fire created a probability cloud, guaranteeing hits even with imperfect aim. A 2-second burst at standard range deposited 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, enough to destroy it. The rounds themselves were advanced, armor-piercing incendiary with delayed fuses, burning at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, capable of igniting aluminum structures. German 20mm shells, though heavier, often detonated on the surface, causing spectacular but sometimes superficial damage. The Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight, 10,000 pounds, exceeded the gross weight of some twin-engine fighters. Its engine produced more power than entire bomber formations from the previous war. Its guns delivered more firepower than a squad of infantry. And yet, it was built by the thousands, flown by teenagers, and maintained under combat conditions by mechanics trained in weeks. The transformation in German opinion was swift. In less than 2 years, the flying milk bottle became terror incarnate. Veterans who faced Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without flinching spoke of the P-47 in hushed tones decades later. At the U.S. Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D sits among other legendary fighters. Its placard lists specs and battle honors, but the real story is told by a small display of spent 50 caliber rounds and gun camera film showing a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under fire. An interrogation report from 1945 quotes a German pilot: "We laughed when we first saw them. Fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed their guns at you, and you ceased to exist." The laughter died with our comrades. The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as an object of derision and ended the war as an instrument of annihilation. 8 synchronized Brownings rewrote aerial warfare and buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of lead. German pilots laughed at the ungainly American fighter in April.